Welcome to The Process with Tola. My guest for this episode is Daniel Hess, the author of the poetry collection Just a Boy Blaming Himself. Hope you enjoy our conversation. I'll start by asking this. What do you do? What's your current state of affairs?
Well, so, I work mainly in videography, and I do work with a corporate video company on a freelance basis with a event and kind of wedding-based video company on a freelance basis. And then I also work with a marketing firm right now on a part-time basis. And then just doing my own kind of creative endeavors on the side between everything.
Right. How did you get into that sort of work?
So I went to college for film, and I had a close friend that sort of got me into the world of it all. And when I graduated, I kind of didn't really have much of a clue where to go with things in life. And a friend of a friend knew somebody at this corporate video studio that was looking for some help. And that was kind of my first foot in the door to like the video world. And I've just been freelancing and finding my own way through my own company kind of ever since.
And your company is called To Tony, right? To Tony
Yep.
Production.
hmm So I,
Who's Tony? Who's Tony?
so it's the company comes from it's a dedication to my cousin, and we were really close friends growing up. His name was Tony, and he unfortunately passed away at age 14 when I was only 10 from cystic fibrosis. So when it came time to name the company, I wanted to have like a deeper meaning than just my name or some abbreviation of like me in the title. So I
Right.
wanted it to be that. So that's what I ended up naming it, for him to kind of honor his memory.
That's awesome. Um, Obviously, that's a deep emotional tie to um what you're doing currently, because I can see that your book is also dedicated in some way to your cousin as well.
hmm
Um, but I want to take it from the top. Why poetry? Why did you decide to get into poetry? What was it about poetry that struck you as a way to communicate your emotions?
Well, after dealing with kind of the loss when I was younger, I found myself kind of like first getting into writing and everything. And for a long time, I would write like poetry here or there, and it just kind of like would kind of come out. Like it was just these weird kind of moments of like just flashes in my mind, and I would just sort of start writing things out on a paper. And for a long time, I just thought like, this is just me rambling on a page. Like there's no merit to any of this. But as I kind of got older and, I took like a creative writing class in college, and I can remember reading a lot of poetry that was like very grounded and very gritty. And it was kind of my first like realization that like, maybe what I'm putting on the paper like does have some meaning behind it. And, you know, the last 5 or 6 years since kind of like getting into smartphones and all that stuff, like I just started kind of using the notepad app, and I just was had flashes, and I would just write something really quick, and I would share every now and again like with a friend or an acquaintance. And I had a lot of people that would kind of tell me like, oh, this is pretty good stuff, maybe you should think about doing something with it. And again, still kind of just thought like, this isn't that good. Like I shouldn't do anything with this. And then I started writing again a lot more once the pandemic stuff sort of happened. And I thought about it, and I was like, maybe I need to just collect this and do something with it. And found somebody that could help me sort of edit it all together. And then I found someone who could help with the, paperback formatting and the Kindle formatting and all that stuff. And just kind of made it happen. But it was just a weird track of just like a lot of time in my head spent thinking like what I was writing just wasn't really worthwhile or worth kind of putting out there.
Why did you think it wasn't worthwhile? What was the driving force behind that sort of reasoning?
I guess I just thought like it was too like there just wasn't anything to it. Like it was just too simplistic or like it was too kind of just like on the nose with stuff or something. I don't know. I just kind of like always got in my head about it. And I think that's kind of like, what a lot of artists sort of deal with is you look at something and you're like, yeah, it's okay, but like I don't think I should do anything with it. So it's just a lot of like second guessing more than anything.
Right, right. Did the creative writing class help in any way to address that feeling?
Um, I mean, so the creative writing class was really good, and I'm sad that I don't have any of the work that I did when I was in that class because I remember I wrote like a lot, and I can remember like the teacher really saying like a lot of good things about my work. Um, but at that time, because that would have been around what, like I think 2009 or 2010. I just still didn't really know like where to put any of it. So like I think that was the other thing that sort of stopped me too, was like even if I did have kind of a moment of a little more confidence, I just still didn't have like the the drive to try to find avenues to place it in or to do like
Mhm.
the research with like how I could maybe further like what I'm writing and getting it out there into the public, eye more. So it just kind of
Sure.
again fell by the wayside and I was doing a lot of like film projects then too, so that kind of was taking up a lot more of like my focus than the writing probably should have been at that time.
Right, right. When did you finish college?
So I graduated in 2012, uh, and then I moved out from my parents' place in 2013, early 2013. So life just kind of like hit really, really fast. So the drive became to sort of, get something job wise really quickly that could help with like rent and all that stuff. So,
Absolutely.
what always comes with that is like, unless you're kind of really established in the creative sense, you're not making that much money from the creative side. So it all just kind of
Mhm.
became like the business side of especially video stuff. So all the creativity kind of went away for a little while in my life because of that like constant need to just be able to pay the bills and everything like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's funny because I also graduated 2012 as well.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so commonality there.
Yeah, I'm sure you remember it. Just still, at least here, like in the States, it was like such a bad time to graduate still because the economy was like really crappy here.
Absolutely. I mean, here was, I mean, there were a lot of things going on here, but
Hmm.
I mean, I think it's just been like a continuation. And of course, with the pandemic, it's just kind of just snowballed into something that's unrecognizable. So it's been, yeah, it's been interesting to put it mildly.
Yeah.
Um, so I looked on your website and I saw that you've made a few short films.
Hmm. So
Um, yeah,
yeah, so
please go
just
ahead.
over the years, I've made a couple. Mainly, a lot of those were like during the college times, and then I had that kind of resurgence in the last couple years of getting back into it and been able to make a few. And then this past year, I was able to sit down and write my first feature film, uh, which I'm like kind of in that area of thinking about trying to get it produced, but I'm not sure 100% yet behind it. So I'm kind of
Why?
like,
Why?
well, so actually, just yesterday, I had a great experience where I was able to actually sit down with three like legitimate, maybe not Hollywood producers, but legitimate producers that finance and make like $1 million+ feature films. And I did a 10-minute pitch with each of them virtually, and just got a lot of great feedback. And I think inevitably the story is one that was very cathartic for me, as it got a lot of past, I guess, like trauma and experiences out there. But as far as like, I think it's a marketable script, but I think it's not something as
It's
tight
heavy.
and as was heavy, but it's also kind of like, it's kind of got two faces to it. You know, it's kind of split. And I think that like
Mm.
it's something that's just a little maybe too like convoluted in the way it tells its story and not sort of direct enough. And I would
Mm.
hate for myself to like push so hard and then make something that ultimately ends up kind of not working as well as I'd want it to. Because like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
then it would just be a poor reflection of like, you know, the product that comes out of it that I make as a director. And I would never want to like create something that's not 100% like focused and everything that I kind of need it to be. So it was good to just sit down and like chat and kind of get that really solid feedback from those people.
Excellent. Excellent. I mean, I guess that brings me to the heart of what I want to talk to you about.
Hmm.
Like I said, I liked what I read. I thought it was great. It's
Thank
quite a
you.
dense piece of writing, divided into six parts.
Hmm.
It's called "Just a Boy Blaming Himself."
Yep.
Um, I'm curious as to how you came about that title. First of all,
So I'm always a fan. If I can have any sort of kind of like alliteration and stuff, I try to do it a little bit when I can. So there's a little bit of
mm,
that in there. And then I again like just kind of thinking too much and sort of like questioning myself too much has been like a constant theme in my life. So, you know, it's very, again, kind of a little on the nose where it's just like, that's just how I felt through the years sometimes, where I'm like, you know, you think about experiences and stuff that you've been through, and it's like, am I, am I the one that's maybe the problem here? Like, you know, going through and having, you know, bad relationships or having friends kind of like not be friends anymore and stuff like that. You start to question yourself. So that's a lot of
sure.
like where the title kind of comes from.
So, yeah. Do you find that you live in your head quite a bit? Would you say?
Oh yeah, I'm always just overthinking. That's why I have to constantly like work and keep going because like that's the only way I can, you know, get out of my head a lot of times. Because otherwise I'm
Right.
just, especially like I can be such a nostalgia person, you know. It only takes something very minute and I can just go down like nostalgia lane real quick. And so I'm just always trying to avoid that as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. So I get the sense that the book is like the collection is a collection of writing you've done over the years. Am I right in saying that?
So yeah, this is basically about, you know, 5 years of just collecting things through different experiences.
Excellent, excellent. And is it about collecting experiences, or was it a collection of work you'd done over the period of 5 years?
Yeah, so it was just anytime I just have like a flash, it would just be instantly or as soon as I could, I'd just grab my phone and just pull up the notepad and start, you know, writing lines out.
Mm,
And I just kind of got into that pattern over the last couple years. So I mean, there'd be, you know,
mm,
instances where I'd be like on a video shoot and, you know, for better or worse, you sneak over and just hurry up and write something down really quick that just sort of hit me and then you know go back to doing the work or whatever. But it was just things like that, you know. It was just always kind of these flashbulb moments, and then I'd have like it usually would be like a line or two, and then after that I would just kind of write off the cuff, and somehow it would
mm,
always seem to like work out in the end. You know, so there's never
mm,
I usually never have like a full poem in my head before I start writing. It's usually just
mm,
like it sometimes it can just be like literally a word that blossoms into something or a line, and then next thing I know I have like, 6 or 7 lines. And usually that I keep them pretty short. So usually that's, kind of like the middle ground that I go in is just 6, 7, maybe 8 lines deep, and then kind of leave it at that.
Well, I mean, just looking at what you wrote, like I said, it's very personal. It's like I said, sometimes it's a bit on the nose. Was that? Did you filter yourself at all?
Sorry, that.
Oh, sorry. Did you? Yeah, I just cracked it for a sec. Did you filter yourself writing? Did you try to censor yourself in any way, or did you just go, "I'm just going to go all the way here"?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just went with it. It was weird. I kind of had to be a little like out of body when I was like, putting it out there, because I had to kind of forget that I didn't filter, because there's some instances where I've had people kind of be like, man, you kind of really, really put yourself out there. And I'm just like, I guess, like, but it was just, I told myself, like, this is what art is sometimes. It's just, sometimes it makes you a little uncomfortable, or is like, maybe a little too, like, far with where it reaches to sometimes. So I tried to control myself from filtering things as much as I possibly could. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much, except for fixing grammar and stuff like that in some instances, it's pretty much what I wrote down in those times kind of in that book. So, not a whole lot in that regard.
What would you say was the most challenging poem that you wrote in this collection, and why?
Well, I think
if you can pinpoint, if you can pinpoint one, or
if there's one, so there's one that I wrote about that was about a night that I had with a woman that didn't really go very well. I can't remember the title of it off the top of my head, but I remember, it was it was supposed to be basically like a hookup type of an event, and she was somebody that I thought I could maybe do something with, and then it ended up that I wasn't really all that attracted to her, and
oh wow,
she came over, and I tried my best, but things just couldn't happen, and basically had to kind of do the old, well, I got work in the morning kind of stuff, and it was really awkward. And so I wrote about, like, it was a lot that happened, and it was a lot that I was kind of, again, in my head about, because I felt bad that I had, thought I could do something, went through all the motions. I could tell she really wanted to and couldn't do anything. And so I just wrote about that. And, that's in there. And I mean, I remember somebody had reached out and specifically said about that poem that was just like, man, I feel bad for that girl, like, and all this stuff. And I was like, well, it was my fault. Like, I was the one who, made everything happen and then couldn't do anything in the actual act of it all. So, that's why I sort of got it out there. But yeah, that was one of the more like challenging ones, because that was one of the ones where I was almost like, man, maybe I shouldn't put this in here. But then I was just like, no, I just got to do it.
So over the period of 5 years, you wrote a lot of poetry. That I think that about almost 200 poems in here. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. Did you write every day? Did you write consistently? And how did you select the poems that you finally put into the collection?
Yeah, no, I didn't really write every day. It would really just be if I was, somewhere where I wasn't really feeling comfortable or was going through something, like those would be the times when I would write. Or if I was like having a good day where I was like maybe listening to some really good music or some new song that sort of hit me really hard, I would write something. So it would just be kind of like very random moments. Um, And when it came time to start like picking the poems for it, I mean, I pretty much laid out almost everything I had. And I think I only really cut like maybe 10 or 15 poems at most. So it was almost pretty much everything that I had written over the last 5 years, except for just a little selection of those. Uh, and those ones
Okay.
that I didn't put in weren't, some of them were just kind of like a little unfinished or just, more kind of like direct stuff. It was more like journaling than it was poetry for some of those. So that was why, some things got cut.
Okay. Okay. Um, what was the thought process behind the sequence, apart from the fact that some were written before others? Was that the sequence, or did you feel there was a structure that you had to follow when you put the book together?
So I sort of, at first I put them all in, one specific order. And then once I had talked with the gentleman who did like the editing for me, I had mentioned about putting them in different categories. And he was the one who kind of was like, well, maybe something like love and sex and death. He was like, because these are a lot of the themes that I'm kind of seeing in your poems. And I said, okay, that's not a bad idea. So once I had those sort of categories all figured out, I just kind of fit those in. So nothing is in any kind of like actual like writing chronological order. It's more just kind of whatever category I felt like the poem kind of felt or fit the most into, and that's how I sort of like laid it out. So they're kind of just in, a randomized order under each like category with the different
Okay.
poems.
So it was this gentleman that basically saw these themes and suggested that you categorize them as such.
Yeah, so like I said, I kind of, I was leaning in that direction anyway, like thinking about just kind of more of broad strokes with that, like the whole love theme and then the death theme and stuff. But I mean, he was the one who kind of like at least brought, a couple of those into the surface because he was just like, this is what I'm kind of seeing from my end. And I just thought that was a really like good note because I just knew that it was too much to just kind of if I just put them all in a book, it'd be like, oh my goodness, you wouldn't even know where to start because it would be just all this random poems just all over the place.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, so when did you actually finally publish this collection?
So I finally published it about that would have been mid to late January of this year. Uh,
Okay.
Basically, it was just as soon as I sent it out to get formatting, like once she kind of came back with everything, because it was a woman that I found through, of all places, Fiverr, and she was really good at what she did, had really good reviews. So she got it done in like a month. And then once I got it back, I
Mhm.
sat on it for like a couple days. And then I was just like, well, I guess, we just launch it and did all the stuff through Amazon. And then it went live. And, it's been like a weird journey ever since because I really didn't have like a marketing plan in place or anything like that. But I've just been slowly like pushing it and it's been people have been picking it up and it's been doing pretty well for itself so far, all things considered.
That's cool. That's cool. What has been the eventual marketing strategy? Because you said you didn't really have anything in mind. You just kind of just decided to launch. Has anything kind of shaped up apart from, I guess, reaching out to me, for instance? What else have you tried to do?
So yeah, so I've actually been, reaching out to a lot of like indie bookstores, and so far I've gotten it into I think 7 or 8 bookstores like across the country. So it's
Okay.
been, yeah, it's been pretty exciting because like I kind of researched it and just, found out like when you reach out to different places, you just let them know about like that you're pushing the book and marketing it. And it's not just, a book that you're trying to just pass on to these different companies or different bookstores. So I just go
Mm.
into them. I send them a nice email that kind of explains what I'm doing, what the book's about. And, you just repeat that process. And so there's been, a lot that I haven't gotten into, but I mean, it's been cool that like, I have this little book that didn't really have a clue of what to do with, and now it's, sitting in bookshelves all over the US, or at least in a couple spaces all over the US. So that's pretty cool.
It's pretty awesome. The process of getting into a bookstore,
Mm-hmm.
would you say that was relatively easy in retrospect, or what? How does that even work? Because you said you had to write, obviously, a nice email. Do you have to print it out yourself? Do you have to ship it? Do they ask for a payment? What is the process behind that?
Yeah, so every bookstore is a little different. Like some of them, because I did partnership with Amazon Kindle stuff, and then I also have done through Ingram Spark, which is another like printing service. And a lot of the indie bookstores, they'll deal with Ingram Spark. Mostly, Amazon's great if you're just selling like public facing, but when it comes to like trying to get it into bookstores, like nobody wants to deal with Amazon because that's just kind of the competitor, if anything else. So like Ingram Spark works a lot better with like the local publisher or the local like bookstores and stuff. So, that was the first step, was getting it in there. And then, I pretty much just let them know that like, hey, it's here, but some of them do have like a consignment program where, yeah, I have to like have copies of the book that I have myself and then ship those to them and sort of, let them know like, hey, this is the book, and they'll review it, and they can either say yes or no to it from there. But then some of them do have like a kind of a gatekeeping in that you have to pay a little bit of a fee to have them even review the book, because they're like, they're larger scale indie bookstores, so they get sent a lot of different like consignment books from people. So it's been a combination of all those things. Sometimes it's just the email, sometimes it's sending the book, and then sometimes it is kind of like a little bit of a fee for them to even consider it.
Mm-hmm. Just going back to the book itself and its themes and content.
Mm-hmm.
I guess because I'm also playing on my mind the fact that you're also a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
How do those themes and what have you translate into your film work, and do you see like a fusion going on there moving forward?
It's funny because actually it's kind of the opposite when it comes to poetry, especially. I've tried several times over the years to really take like a more poetic kind of like mindset into like my film work, and I found for the most part, at least for the way I'd like my career to go, it really doesn't translate all that well. Um, you actually have like, because I've tried to make stuff where it's like a lot of like more poet type of like dialogue, or like a single protagonist or like dealing with things, and honestly it comes out a little like art house student filmmaker ish. So
Oh, basically.
it's something that you see like a first year art student making. No offense to first year art students, but that's that's what it comes across as sometimes. So I actually have to really ground myself way heavier when I'm thinking about like writing film stories now, because yeah, the more you go into that poetic stuff, it's like it's cool if you're doing, some experimental work and things like that, but it is very hard to make it translate for film in a way that's kind of approachable from everybody, like a wider audience, or trying to get like something actually legitimately produced or something like that.
Okay. Is it because of your approach, or let me try to be careful. Is it because of your is it because of your perception of what poetry is, and that's what translates into what you see as first year art films, or is it because that's your, I mean, you must have done this quite a bit, so is it just that's just how you think it is?
That's what I mean. I totally will take full credit in that. Maybe I'm just really bad at making the translation happen. So so it could just be that. I could just be like, I'm just the not the guy to like make that happen. Um, but I found that like the further I remove myself from it and the more I try to control like the story and make things more kind of straightforward, it's been a good like disciplining experience because for me poetry is like that quick sort of flash in the pan moments that I have at different times, and it's a really good way for me to just get like a lot of quick thoughts out on the page really quickly. But it's not the disciplined writing that I want to really challenge myself to do. So that's where like the screenplay writing and right now I'm slowly working on like a novel and stuff like that. So like all of that is sort of where I am where I want to go more because it's the harder writing in my mind. It's just because I really have to sit down and like think about it and create like these larger worlds that different characters and stories inhabit. So yeah, so again, it's just for the poetic sense, like there's filmmakers that I think do it really well, and I've seen some like really beautiful long form films that do like very beautiful visual stuff, but I can write it, but for whatever reason the way my brain works, like I'm so bad with like seeing the visual shots of like a film, like if I'm trying to make it. So I really have to hold myself to like storyboarding more and really nailing down the way it's going to look ahead of time because I just I can't just kind of like go, okay, I know all these shots are going to look really good together. My brain just doesn't process it. It's like, whoa, what are we doing? And then it just gives up.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's a fair and articulate assessment. So we'll go with that. What I mean, just following from that. What does poetry mean to you in the sense that is it just a means of expressing deep emotional thought, flash in the pan thoughts, or can it be something greater? What do you think the potential is within poetry?
Well, I think poetry is I mean, it's all of those things. It's these deep thoughts that you have that sort of are either in the forefront or the back of your mind. And I think the flash and the pan moments when you start to write those, at least for me, is just, that's whenever that little tingling in the back of the brain, like processing something is just pops into the forefront. And then I just have to get it down. But I think, poetry in general is just like, it's this beautiful kind of like, it's almost song-like in its quality, because you can have like very beautiful spoken word style poetry. There's so many different kind of like avenues that you can have with it. And, I think it's weird because it's like one of those things that just comes so, I guess, naturally and easily to me that like maybe in some ways I kind of sell it a little short, honestly, like as bad as that sounds,
Mhm.
because it's just like I I'm one of those people that like when things are too easy, I just again I question it too much. So like because it can just happen just so quickly for me, it just has become almost like second nature. So, I know what I'm writing can be like very inspiring or very kind of cathartic for people to look at, but it just I don't know, it just never really like goes that way in my brain sometimes. I guess because, like I said, it just happens so quickly and so naturally in different instances.
Right, right. Um, I guess I would ask this: what do you think makes a good poem? Because you've just said that it comes easily to you, and from what I've read, I think you do it quite well. What makes you read something and go, okay, that's a good poem, as opposed to that's just someone spewing a lot of the emotional angst on the page. Is there a difference?
um
Like, is there like do you have to follow like a rhyming structure? Do you like what is it that you go, okay, I really like that?
I mean, I think there has to be like some sort of, I guess, playfulness to it. in a way. I think there has to be a little bit of just like, not so much maybe like a strict rhyming structure or anything like that. I just think like, you for me, it's kind of just like thinking a little outside of like the normal way you would actually write. So it's just kind of like you just kind of take liberties with things. So like to me, that's when I see like a good poem, I feel like it's somebody who kind of understands writing enough that they're willing to kind of like have a little fun with it and also just kind of like use different things. Like I said, like I'm always a big fan of alliteration. So like seeing things like that sort of all kind of combined together, it makes the difference between something that is, deeper thought, I guess, like writing versus just, kind of yelling at the page for, 10
I
lines.
like that. I like that. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so what, all right, so if you saw a poem that you didn't like, what would you articulate your thoughts be? Like, what would you say, gosh, that just didn't sit well with me? Apart from the yelling on the page thing that you just said, I mean, is it what would stick out to you?
um, I guess if I saw something, I'm trying to think. I mean, that's a really good question because it's just, I mean, if,
I mean, the way I see it is that you can go on Facebook, you can go on Instagram, and
mhm.
everyone is writing, right? And there's a consistent theme of love and my heart and my love and all that kind of stuff. So you can see consistent things going on, and I'll admit some are better than others, right? But
Mhm.
there is a commonality, and there's almost this idea that everyone feels they can do it.
Yeah, I think
Am I being too am I being too cynical there?
no, I think, with the rise of stuff like social media with Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, I think it has, there are a lot of people who think that, they're pulling off something when they might not be. I think a lot of it has to do with just a lack of just really kind of original stuff. I think a lot of people just pull from a lot of things without maybe even realizing it. So I think like that's one of the biggest things. Like when I start seeing, like if somebody's kind of pulling lines from different poets or different like writings over the years, like, it's one thing to borrow a little bit from that stuff, but it's another thing to kind of like almost kind of copy stuff. So I think like
Mm,
I'll notice a lot of that, like a lot of just people just straight up kind of like not really even tweaking something, just really kind of just taking something for what it was and then just acting like it might be something that they came up with when it's really not.
mm, mm. Um, what was the what would you say was your favorite poem from the ones you've written in this particular book? Or what sort of themes do you think you've tackled quite well?
Um, well, I think like, talking about speaking on like past relationships and stuff, I think kind of was like the most center stage of the poems in this collection. So like I'm kind of happy with a lot of getting that out there because I feel like that's just been one of the biggest struggles with my life over the last like especially, you know, last 10 years now. Because I've had two long-term relationships and in between each of those and since the last one has been, was that happened. It's just been a lot of just like I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, dating apps exist, and so there's been a lot of late night rendezvous and such of that nature in my life.
Right,
So
right.
just getting a lot of those experiences and kind of dealing with that out there, because again, going back to like overthinking things and everything, like I've always kind of gone back and forth on even feeling if I would be okay to have a long-term relationship again or if I could do that with
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
somebody. So I feel like
mm-hmm,
a big chunk of it, goes to that in this book. And I'm happy
mm-hmm.
with like I said, just getting a lot of that out there.
Does it help you being able to articulate these thoughts? Does it go a long way and hopefully kind of come to terms with a lot of stuff? Does it help?
I think it helps a lot. Especially like in those moments, because I've kind of learned from different, I guess, friend experiences that like, it's one thing to sort of talk to somebody about like what you're dealing with, but I actually find it better to just write about it because like, I feel like when you kind of talk about things, there's just a lot of like negative air that gets put out, into the world. And so I feel like when I'm writing this down, it sort of contains those emotions like in one place. And I'm not really left reflecting as heavy on them, maybe in that way. Because like I'm just like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. All right, here's how I want to convey it on the page. I put it on the page, and then I'm like, if I want to come back to it, of course I can. But usually it's just that it'll sit, in that place in my phone for a while. And then, like with all these poems, it really didn't come back to the surface again until I started, collecting them all and putting them on to, a single document. Um, but like I saw through that like I was almost kind of like, oh wow, like I went through this and I did that and I felt like I'd all kind of like grown from those experiences. So I guess in some way it works because like I said, it's just interesting to see that I'm evolving past some of those things. Like the guy that wrote one of those poems one day, I'm like, I'm not that person anymore because I would never do that ever again. Like that was a crappy experience or something crappy I did. And, now I'm not going to hold myself or try to act that way anymore.
Mm-hmm. Do you still blame yourself for stuff generally?
I do my best not to. I found that, especially the last year, I've gained a lot more like confidence in myself. What I think what was happening a lot of times was that there was still a lot of like demons that were inside from especially my first kind of long-term relationship, and really tackling that over the last like year has kind of gotten me away from it because I just had like terrible self-esteem. Like I just felt like no, I wasn't worthy of anything. I wasn't worthy of, my writing wasn't worthy of anything. Nothing was. And I really found
Is that
to,
a mental health situation? Is it a trauma situation? Is it a combination of both? Like what's going on there?
yeah, I think it is because that relationship, I mean, I wasn't the greatest person in it, and I could never sit here and say sole blame on the other, on my girlfriend at the time and all that stuff. But there was, honestly, there was a lot of gaslighting that went on in that relationship. There was at times verbal abuse, and even in some instances, a little bit of physical abuse that occurred that I like fell under. And so, yeah, there's a lot of trauma that I was processing from that.
Mm.
And the breakup went horrible. And then there was a lot of lingering for a while because we still stayed in touch, even though there's no reason we should have. And so it was just, there's a
Mm.
lot to like process through all of that. Um,
Mm.
and so, yeah,
Um,
so there is a lot of that went on too.
so you have your poetry and you have your creative film endeavors as well. How else do you uh manage with life?
Well, it's the biggest thing is I love bike riding. I mean, that's just like there's a that's my like free moment, when I'm just out because I have like
Is
some
that a motorbike or a bicycle?
just a bicycle. I,
Right,
I'm I'm
right.
not I'm not cool enough to have a motorbike.
I was picturing you like Dylan on a bike, speeding down the highway.
Yeah, just get the big leather jacket and I'm good to go.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, the,
Oh,
the biking and then I play like playing basketball with an old high school friend. Like we'll hang out and play basketball, and those are kind of the two physical outlets for me that work most of all. Because
mm,
those are just I just tune out, and that's when even though I'm not preoccupied with like work, it's just like all the blaming self and all the weird thoughts kind of go away in those instances. So it's just always really nice, kind of just being able to do that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, poetry is wonderful, but it's not everything. So
Hmm.
nice to be able to have different sort of outlets. What's the last year been like for you for this pandemic?
It was, well, I mean, March happened, and once everything went into lockdown, I pretty much saw my whole calendar year, which was going to be a pretty good year, went away in like a week. So I was terrified for a while because like my honestly, like my savings were already not all that great to start with because I had just put a lot of money out on some creative projects the year before. Um, and so I was terrified. But then, the thing that really helped was, when the government put out the pandemic unemployment and everything, and anybody that was like a gig worker could get unemployment. And so I was able to collect that for a while in the time when nothing was really happening. Um, and I used that free time too. I started reading like crazy. I mean, I read so many books last year, and I started writing the script, and through that, like it really kept me sane, because I wasn't going anywhere, I wasn't really seeing anyone, and I was just kind of stuck at home. But
Mm,
through that, I just experienced like so much personal growth because I, was able to stay at home and wasn't rushing around trying to like find work and go crazy to try to get gigs and all this kind of stuff. I was really able to
mm,
kind of supplant myself, with a few different people that now just kind of hand me work. And I'm fortunate that I don't have to really hunt for it like I used to all these years leading up to this.
mm, mm. It strikes me as amusing almost that for someone who suffers from, I guess you said you suffer from self doubt and overthinking, that you put yourself, I guess, work wise in a situation where it's because being a freelance isn't the most stable
It,
position to be in, at least initially. So how did that happen? Because I would imagine that you tried to find some sort of security. Were you trying to break out of that headspace and just do something that challenged you, or what was it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's weird because at first I was trying to find those like secure type of jobs when I had first gotten out of school. And I was doing that a little bit, but I just never really found like a really good footing with anything. I mean, I was doing like some pretty crappy stuff. I mean, I was I was doing there's like a little league stadium that was close to where I used to live, and I was like taking baseball photos at that place, and I was like literally making $20 a game, and there'd only be like 4 games in a day, so I'd be lucky to make like $100 a day out of that. Then I was doing like souvenir photos at an aquarium that was nearby in my town. So it was just like really bad stuff like that. And I actually got again lucky because somebody who is doing wedding photography found my company online and said, "Hey, I'm looking for somebody to do video with me. Do you want to jump on it?" And he offered me like $1,000 a wedding. So I was just like, "That sounds great to me. I'm almost broke." So I I took him up on it, and at the once my breakup happened, from my longest relationship, I really doubled down in the wedding world, and I partnered with a company that did like online marketing for just like wedding professionals, and paid for like help with their marketing services. And within like 2 years, I was able to turn the company into like 100 grand a year company, and I was just filming weddings left and right. But the caveat to that was that I was dealing with a lot of the personal issues from the breakup, so I was in a pretty miserable situation where I was just constantly filming people on the happiest day of their lives, and here I am, just mopey Dan, in filming them. And
That should be
so
the next script for sure.
I should, well, yeah, it should be exactly. Um,
That's absolutely hilarious. Yeah.
So like that was my step into the serious freelance world, and I kind of got hooked on it, and there is like a part of me now that I'm getting older, and I'd like to have like some place that can just give me insurance instead of having to pay for it myself and all that kind of stuff. So like I do have rumblings of like wanting some security, but in the same vein, I'm just like I just love the amount of like freedom I can give myself and kind of schedule creating that I can make for myself. So it's this weird kind of push and pull where I'm like, man, just knowing I'm going to make this amount each month would be great. But then like there's also sometimes where I realize like there's months with freelancing where like I make double what I could make at like a regular day job. It's just you do get those months where it's like you make like half of that. So it's weird because it's like in the end maybe it all sort of balances itself back out. But so that's why I think I haven't taken the dive, because I'm always telling myself that. I'm like, at the end of the day, it's just gonna all equal out to the same amount. And I'm just like, yeah, you're
Absolutely.
probably right.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I guess the grass is always greener, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think you have a healthy perspective on that, for sure. You said you did a lot of reading.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you read, and I guess who inspires you in your writing, if anyone does?
So I actually kind of by random chance fell upon like discover like going back with like Hemingway. Like I don't know what
Oh
it
wow.
was. Yeah, I don't know what it was that sort of flashed in my mind that was just like, "Hey, you never really like read Hemingway that much or something." But I was like it just hit me that I'd never read any of his stuff. So I challenged
Mhm.
myself to just go in like chronological order of like all his work. And so I, read almost all of his books last year, and
Mhm.
it was a really good like inspiration for what I'm writing now, because like his work is very like in a lot of ways of its time and problematic as a result of that, because there's a lot of
Mhm.
like choice words that get used in his books, that just don't stand the test of time, unfortunately.
Sure.
But
Sure.
his writing is very kind of like it's simplistic, and he writes sort of poetically where it's just it's he can take something very simple like talking about a beach or a house by the ocean or something like that, and it's just he has this very kind of descriptive way of kind of pulling you into a scene. And he doesn't really use a lot of like too much dialogue at times, which is always kind of interesting. So yeah, I found it
Mhm.
really cool to read something like that, because it's informed me a lot now and made me feel better or more confident in even trying to write a novel. Because I see where you can kind of like have a poetically simplistic approach to something and still kind of make it all work.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that ties back to what we are talking about earlier about the poetic approach, that it doesn't necessarily need to disappear completely, but if you go all the way in, it could be a little bit much.
Hmm.
Did you read Old Man and the Sea?
Yes. Which so yeah, that
What
was
do you think?
I love that one. I mean, of course, like, one of his strongest works for sure. Um,
Mm.
but it was a lot short. Like I didn't expect it to be as short as it was. And I read it pretty much in a day. Um,
Right.
but that was what was so cool about it, was like that it was so engaging that you could just read that in a single day. Uh, y- you know, so I really enjoyed that book. Like I thought it was beautifully written, and I thought it was kind of like I think it was the perfect length for like if you don't like Hemingway, that's like the perfect length to like read a Hemingway book. Because there's a lot of people who find his stuff, I guess, like a little boring, but usually the boring stuff is what I've kind of find most interesting, believe it or not.
I guess it's about what stage in life you're at, I suppose. And
Yeah.
especially with social media and what have you, I think a lot of people find it hard to hold their attention. So if you're talking about certain subject matters that just don't that that just isn't as engaging as maybe photo on Instagram, then you're just gonna switch off, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, there's a toss up going on there. What are your future It's a weird question. What are your future goals in terms of poetry? Do you want to keep writing? Do you want to keep publishing?
Yeah, so I've actually, kept up writing. So whenever I still get those like flash moments, I pull out the phone again, and so I've been collecting since. It was weird because like right after I published it, I kind of didn't write anything for a while, and I was just like, wait, like I published a book, like does that mean like that's it for my creative stuff? So like I was psyching myself out for a while. I was like, am I just like spent with it? Like this is weird because it was like a longer gap than usual. But no,
Right.
it finally came back around, and yeah, so I've been collecting that again. But mainly, the focus has been on, the novel stuff, and then the last script that I just finished up, and now I'm kind of thinking about what's the next script I want to do. That's going to be the more focused, hopefully easier to produce story that I'd like to try to tackle for like a feature.
Mm-hmm. So is your focus long term on film, or do you see yourself sticking sticking to one lane
No, I kind of
and
see
create
myself
something?
going. I see myself kind of going between the two. I've actually found like another strong like avenue for my writing recently is I've started offering reviews to like independent like short filmmakers. Cause like I kind of sat with myself for a day and realized like a lot of these people that make short films and are really truly independent really don't have much of an avenue as far as like where to send their films to. And so through like my blog, I've actually been, you know, taking in entries from people, and it's been really great because I've gotten a ton of films that I've been able to watch and just write about. And that's where I can sort of really marry the like poetic stuff with the film because like
Hmm.
when I watch something, the way I like process it is almost like in a very poetic sense where I just like I try to find the best like merits in what they're showing visually and sort of like break it down on like the symbolism and like themes that they're trying to convey. So I found a lot of success with that so far, and I've even been able to work with a online publication that does short film reviews as well. And I've actually so now I'm kind of technically a contributing writer for them, and I've had
Mm.
like I think 4 or 5 published reviews just through them alone. So it's been really cool because it's just another easy way to be able to keep writing and keep practicing, and
Absolutely.
be able to watch films, which is what I love to do. So it's a good
Mm.
marriage.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, that's I like the way you rounded that up. Nice marriage because you
Hmm.
do wedding films. That's quite cool. Yeah. Um. Yeah, that was a long walk, but yeah.
Uh-huh.
Why are you based in the U.S.?
I'm based in Baltimore, Maryland, which is on the East Coast.
Right. Um, just to round this up in some sort of way. I mean, I saw from on the outside looking at the U.S. Things seem a little uh upside down, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
What is that does that impact you in any way, mentally or otherwise? And how do you navigate that world? Or is
Well,
that as crazy as it seems?
well, I mean, where I live right now is a very kind of like small blue collar-ish type of community. So it's really kind of pretty well removed from like any kind of, I guess, drama or things like that. Like it's a low crime area. Like so there's not a lot of craziness that goes on here. So mainly what I try to do is like I try to tune it out like as best I can. Um, late last year I actually went through kind of like a interesting run of my life where I was like I think everyone at the same time here in America all got into the stock market for a while. And so like
Okay.
I was like really obsessed with like the stock market stuff for a little bit. And so like
Right.
that made me like a little more on edge because every day you're like looking at the stocks and you're like, oh man, if you know, because Trump was still in at the time, and it's just like, oh man, if Trump goes on and he says something like, oh, the stocks are going down today, I see it, and so like you do that kind of stuff. So I was driving myself a little nutty with that, but
Yeah, that doesn't help.
now that I'm stepped away from it and I've sort of made my fun with it for a little bit, life has gotten a lot simpler again. So yeah, I just try to kind of like I let it happen, and I'm like, you know, the world is gonna be what it's gonna be. I wish it wasn't the way it was in a lot of ways, you know, especially with like a lot of the race relations that are going on here right now. It's terrible, and I'm always just like, my thing is always every year I feel like I say the same thing where I'm like, you know, last year I was saying, look, it's 2020. Why are we all doing this? Like everything should just be chill. Everything should be equal. There should be no questions of this. But yet here we are, and
Right.
now I can say it again. It's like it's 2021. Come on, like everybody's just let's all just hold hands and you know, because life is tough enough. Like we're just making it harder on
It is.
ourselves by not working together here. So maybe one day everybody will catch on to that, but you know, until then
It's
I'll
funny
just
you
keep
say that.
saying it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. I mean, people look at the US and they have a lot of critical things to say. Me included. I mean, I love to take a pop at the US. It's just fun, but
I
I
see
don't
it. It's okay.
I don't dislike the US actually because deep down because I know that everything's on the open and
Hmm.
considering where the country's come from, unlike most places where I'd say a lot of the issues are buried on the ground, so to speak. Um, you guys deal with this stuff every day. It's almost like you have to have that conversation, as uncomfortable as it is. Maybe not fully, maybe not as much as people would like, but everyone knows what's going on in the US, right?
Hmm.
It's a journey that you guys have been on for a long time, and yeah, like I said, hopefully you get to a point where there's some sort of kumbaya conclusion.
That would be
So
nice.
that'd be nice. Yeah, yeah.